Hello, and welcome back to the Divided We Fall podcast. I'm your host, Jake Stratton.
And I'm Greg Beatty.
And we have a new host member. She'll be joining us from now on for the new and upcoming episodes, Lindsay Kirshner.
Hi, I'm Lindsay.
Okay. Greg, take it away.
So today we'll be discussing the minimum wage with Biden's new announcement of increasing the minimum wage federally to $15 an hour. And there's a lot of controversy behind that. I personally believe that we should completely get rid of the minimum wage, and Lindsay has her own opinions. I'll let her describe them now briefly.
So I don't believe in just straight up raising it either, because I feel like that's just ridiculous. Like, why would you make it 2 times as much just out of nowhere? It's going to be so hard, especially for small businesses. So I feel like it should be a gradual increase, and I feel like we should do what France does, which is every year they look at how much it would be to live there, and then they would adjust the minimum wage based off of that.
Okay. So Lindsay, in Pennsylvania, the current minimum wage is set to $9.50, I believe.
No, it's $7.25.
Is it still $7.25? No.
Yes.
On July 1st, 2020, the minimum wage in Pennsylvania was raised to $8, and on January 21st, 2021, it was supposed to be raised to $8.50. So I don't...
Supposed to?
No, it actually wasn't. I can actually explain that. So
would you like to explain that, please?
Yeah. So by the way, I was a minimum wage worker. I worked at Rita's, starting at minimum wage, and I work at McDonald's. So I actually researched this. So there was a bill that Tom Wolf tried to pass last year that would raise the minimum wage by 50 cents, I believe, every 6 months. That actually, I believe, is still in deliberation and did not pass. But yeah, so he tried to get it to pass, but I don't think it's passed yet. It's in the process. Okay,
so in Pennsylvania, we still have a $7.25 minimum wage here. Federally, it's also $7.25. So Lindsay, how much do you currently get paid at your current job?
At Rita's, I'm going to be getting paid $8.75, and at McDonald's, I'm going to be getting paid $9 an hour as a closer.
Okay. When I worked my minimum wage job, I worked at Giant food store as a cashier. I got paid $12.50 an hour. And my other minimum wage job, it wasn't like a full-time job as an educator at a summer camp. I got paid $20 an hour. Question for you and anyone else who believes that we should still have a minimum wage. If we already have a minimum wage of $7.25, why are employers still paying employees more than $7.25, like McDonald's, Giant, Rita's? Why do you think that?
What I would ask you is, what positions do you think are being paid minimum wage? Because typically minimum wage is going to young children and people at the absolute baseline. So like McDonald's, at least my location, usually hires people at $7.25 unless they're working in a dangerous job-ish, like kitchen, where they'll get $8 an hour. And Rita's, we always start at $7.25, period. Doesn't matter where you came from. So like my $9 an hour, I only get that because I closed the store. So yeah.
Okay, but what's the incentive? They could still just pay you the $7.25, right? If they really wanted to.
They could. But I'm putting in more work than the people who are doing $7.25 because, again, I'm closing the store. And at Rita's is because I have more experience.
Okay, so yeah, so it's experience based. So the more you work, the more money you get, and depending on what job you get, you get paid more. That makes sense. But if we never had a $7.25 minimum wage, would employers still have an incentive to pay you more?
I don't think inherently, especially at my McDonald's, because like right now, for example, they're actually refusing to give some employees raises off of absolutely no basis. Like me, for example, I was due for a raise. It's about to be a month now that I was due for a raise and I haven't gotten one.
Okay. According to CBO, which is a federal government publication, Congressional Budget Office, it states that the current federal minimum wage on its trajectory will be... It says it will be lowered. That's what the congressional trajectory says. It will not lowered, but it says the price or the value of the $7.25 minimum wage will go down as money is printed, et cetera, et cetera. And they're talking about 3 different possible outcomes. in 2025 of increasing it to either $10, $12, or $15. Now, what I see as a problem is the direct relationship between minimum wage and unemployment in this country. The United States, well, at least this has been tested across multiple different, like between economists and things like that, and it's a proven thing that if you increase minimum wage, unemployment also goes up. It's reported that if we end up just increasing, and I know you don't agree with this, but if we just flat out increase the minimum wage from $7.25 to $15 an hour, we will lose 1.3 million jobs in the next year. That's we have all the our sites. They'll be in the description, so you can do your own research. Don't take my word for it. But this is from The Economist, which is a publication ran by economists, and also by Forbes, I believe, which is a paper out in Pittsburgh.
Now, when you say increase the minimum wage to $15 flat, are you referencing what Joe Biden's doing currently, or are you saying like what Lindsay was asking, like gradually increasing, or is it both, where like no matter what, $15 an hour is going to eventually lose the country that much money?
So the study that I'm referencing is $15 an hour increase like that. Just okay. It's increased. But no matter what you do, if you increase the minimum wage, unemployment will go up. That's inevitable. It comes with the whole thing, because if you make employers pay more, they're going to cut costs by not hiring as many people.
Right.
Or they'll cut costs like they're doing at some McDonald's, where they have kiosks, and they're doing it at Panera Breads too, where they'll have kiosks instead of cashiers.
Right. That's not just America. That happens in Spain and other countries too, that they have kiosks as well.
So I believe that the market should just kind of influence the pay of the individual. I mean, I don't mean to be rude, but because I also work these jobs, but I don't really believe I should have been getting $12 an hour working at Giant. I was grateful, don't get me wrong, but the job wasn't a $12 an hour job. It was easily a $7.25 an hour job. Now, it was more desirable for me to work there over Acme because I got paid more than at Acme, and Giant didn't require me to join a union. That's a topic for a different day.
If you live somewhere else, equate Acme, Giant, wherever to your local grocery store.
Yeah, your local corporate grocery store, your big corporate grocery store. So yeah, like, these businesses have incentives with competition to keep their prices up. I think that the idea of minimum wage is outdated because we have a lot more laws in place that are forcing companies to be regulated anyway. Like, we have laws where you can't just fire somebody because they got their hand cut off. You can now be sued for that if you just fire somebody, because you have contracts and different things like that. You have unions that I honestly believe are also outdated. But what do you think, Lindsay? What do you think?
What I would ask is, for the minimum wage, would you think that it should be like something like, I believe, Denmark or Sweden, where they just don't have one, period?
Yes.
Then I guess I would follow up with, in Denmark specifically, I don't know about the other ones, but I would assume they'd be the same. In Denmark, what they do for their pay is the people don't advocate for their pay, but instead the unions advocate for their pay. So I believe that if you don't agree with having a minimum wage period, you'd have to agree with the unions, because those are the ones who are giving people in places like Denmark a higher pay. I believe their minimum wage is, or quote minimum wage, is typically around $11.60.
I mean, I can give that. I can give some wiggle room there. If we're not going to have the government regulated, somebody has to regulate and stand up for the individual. That makes sense. I can agree to that.
Unions is also a whole nother topic in discussion when it comes to minimum wage.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about unions now too. I mean, it kind of ties in if we want to talk about that too, because honestly, I think unions are kind of bloated now.
Yes.
I believe if we're going to remove the federal minimum wage and state minimum wages, or even just remove federal minimum wage and allow states to decide. I could even give to that. Allow state governments to decide if the Pennsylvania Supreme Court or this Pennsylvania Senate and House decide, and the governor obviously decide, $15 is good for Pennsylvania. I can concede and say, okay, you know what, states have that right to do so. Removing the federal minimum wage, and if we end up moving all minimum wages, I mean, we're going to have to work on unions too. Unions aren't perfect beings.
I mean, I don't know. I really don't know that much about unions, so I can't talk about it.
Yeah.
But from the research that I have seen, I know a lot of people like to compare. People who are against having no minimum wage like to compare it to the early 1900s, where child labor was legal, people were working 20 hours a day, all this ridiculous stuff. But just to put it out there, the difference between that and places like Denmark, were that the people, period, were advocating for their pay back in the 1900s in the U.S., and they didn't fully understand what they were doing. So of course they're going to get underpaid because they don't know about the economy. They're just working a minimum teeny tiny little money job. But
Yeah.
people in Denmark, they've got these experienced people in these unions advocating for them. So it's very different situations. So having no minimum wage isn't necessarily bad, as long as it's not the same as the 1900s.
Yeah. And according to the article that I have pulled up, Forbes, which is pulling all of its information from the CBO, again, that is the Congressional Budget Office. This is a national government-sponsored website. This is not just some crackpot theorists. And this is a reputable source. They're saying here that if you raise the minimum wage, this is a direct quote, raising the minimum wage has a number of serious and negative unintentional consequences. Employers, especially small families and mid-sized businesses, will be disproportionately hurt by the cost occurred. The local neighborhood stores and businesses with razor-thin profits will be forced to raise prices to make up for the added labor costs. With the increased prices, customers may elect to take their business elsewhere, losing customers meaning losing income, which could result in the business having to lay off workers. And now this is talking about small businesses. This isn't talking about corporate. Corporations like Giant, Acme, Apple, Amazon, things like that, which do already usually pay above minimum wage. I believe Amazon has a flat $15 an hour minimum wage. Don't direct quote me on that. I believe that's the case.
It's high because when I went to apply for jobs, Amazon is an appealing place to work because they pay high, but they also have a rough schedule.
Yeah, so they pay high. So focusing on small businesses, as Lindsay pointed out herself, this is where I think we can agree increasing the minimum wage with a shock to the economy at $15 an hour would crush small businesses. I think we can agree on that.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm not opposed because I can't control, obviously, what the government's going to end up doing. But I can get behind governments fluctuating the minimum wage to account for inflation. So, let's say the $7.25 now, you're at $7.25 back in 1950 is like $15 now. I could see slowly getting up to that point while adjusting for inflation. But I also see a lot of ramifications. Now, if we wanted to set it to corporations have to pay $15 an hour, and small businesses can still uphold, the $7.25 or even less, depending on the company. I think that could also work. I don't know. What do you think, Lindsay?
Oh, I would 100% agree with that, because especially the difference between pay and productivity, that makes me so angry. Just looking at the graphs, I got one put up right now, it is disgustingly far away, because productivity's gone up so high and compensation has stayed almost stagnant. I believe it's gone up 11.6% since 1980, or sorry, not 1979, while productivity has gone up 69.6%
This is true.
since 1979. And it's absolutely ridiculous. And to me, at least, I feel like for corporations specifically, the people who are pocketing that extra money from that productivity are people who are owning the franchises for, like, I don't know, McDonald's, Rita's, whatever. They're pocketing that money most likely. And, like, it's just ridiculous. I work so much harder, but I don't get anything out of it. So I'd much rather have minimum wage for corporations. So they have to pay you at least closer to the amount of work you're putting in.
Okay, I think we found some pretty good common ground on that one. Why do you think, now that this is me playing devil's advocate, why do you think increasing the minimum wage should stop? Do you think it should stop at 15, or do you think minimum wage should continue going up once we hit the $15 mark?
I think we should do what France does, because every year France, again, they take into account how much it would take to live there, and then they do their minimum wage based off of that. Like, it shouldn't just stop at 15, because inflation's never going to stop. You know, It has to keep going up in proportion to things like inflation, productivity, etc.
Yeah, so I can see that. But here in the United States, at least, we hear a lot of liberal politicians, mostly Democrat politicians, saying a living wage. The minimum wage was never meant to be a living wage here in the United States. I can't speak for other countries. The purpose of it was actually to prevent African Americans from being offered a lower wage. It was supposed to help stymie racism in the United States, so that it would allow for equal pay among, and it also would take into account when gendered work comes in, when women were allowed to work in factories and things like that, like in later times, coming up into the modern era. Do you believe that because you mentioned the cost of living there, do you believe that the minimum wage is a living wage, should be a living wage?
I think that it should be turned into a living wage. And again, I think we should do what France does, because France, with their minimum wage, if you're below the age of 17, you only get 80% of the minimum wage, and if you're between 17 and 18, you get 90%. And then if you're above that, obviously 100%. I feel like it should be turned from this slave labor thing where, again, like productivity versus hourly compensation, like to close that gap, I feel like we should raise it up and make it a living wage, because especially some of these minimum wage jobs, like they people need to be paid more, and they need to be able to live off of it. Like McDonald's managers, for example. I can tell you how many times I've talked with my managers, and they've just been like, oh yeah, I worked 60 hours this week. I stayed here until 12. I had to come back in at 4. And they're doing things that can't be automated, you know?
I mean, this is, I guess, where we're just going to have to also just disagree. I honestly don't believe the minimum wage should ever be used as a living wage. I see it as many Republicans see it. I myself am not a Republican, but many Republicans share this idea that minimum wage is just meant as an introductory pay. You're not meant to live off of it. You're meant to use it to get a foot through the door, so to speak. So that you get a little bit of income while you're in high school or you're in college to then segue into a career. Now I can see why that also has its own problems, but I feel like we might be entering dangerous territory when we use McDonald's as a sustainable source of income for a family of 5, if you know what I mean.
Sorry, it's just experience. Do you think the minimum wage should be turned into a living wage sometime in the future, or do you think it should just always be introductory no matter what?
I think if we're going to have a minimum wage, keep it introductory because of the possible ramifications of it on the economy. The economy is not... now, I've heard the argument, society over economy. But you have to take into account that society is linked. It's symbiotic to the economy. You can't have one without the other. If you don't have a society, you don't have a workforce, you don't have families, you're never going to have an economy. And if you don't have an economy, you're not going to be able to support your family. You're not going to be able to, have commodities and goods and things like that. So they go hand in hand. So I feel like the negative effects outweigh the possible benefits for the few, if you know what I mean. Because the possible shutting down of small businesses because they can't keep up with the minimum wage, and also if we want to throw this in there, if we increase taxes as well on businesses, these small businesses that are also struggling currently through a pandemic aren't going to be here after the pandemic. Now, maybe during the pandemic, could businesses like Acme, Giant, Apple, Amazon increase their own wages to help sponsor people because they probably have enough money to help pay more to their employees? I think that'd be a great idea for them to do it on their own. Now, I don't think the government should come in and tell them they have to do it. But I think it might be, out of the kindness of their own hearts, they could pay their employees a little bit more to help them in a pandemic, which they're not really doing.
Yeah, hear me out. Okay, so you said earlier that you would agree with having a minimum wage for corporations, but not small businesses, right?
I said I could see that being a thing.
If there was a minimum wage for corporations only, would you agree with that being a livable wage or no?
Depending if the corporations that are there are able to support that. Because if we're gonna, let's take Amazon, which is is it SpaceX now the most profitable company, or is it still Amazon?
I have no idea.
Let me look.
I think it might still be Amazon. Because I know Elon Musk just overtook Jeff Bezos recently in.
It might be a bunch because he owns a bunch of companies, like The Boring Co. and stuff like that. So
let's just stick with Amazon for simplicity's sake. If Amazon is able to support a $20 an hour minimum wage, let's say that's what the government sets it at. If Amazon can support $20 an hour, because that's actually a lot of money. Let's say you work 8-hour days, $20 an hour, you work Monday to Friday, you could probably support a family of 3 off that if both parents are working. You could, and if that's even for college students, getting $20 an hour 5 days a week. I'm a college student myself. Lindsay's a college student. That'd be awesome. That'd be really, really nice. If the corporation can support it and they don't have to lay off people, I think that's a perfect idea to also help with the individuals who believe that corporations are too rich, if you know what I mean. Instead of taxing them, and then not just because when we get into the tax structure, we're not actually just taxing corporations. I highly doubt there's ever been a tax bill out there that hasn't increased taxes on every single tax bracket. Corporations aren't getting the short end of the stick when it comes to tax brackets. Most of the time, they're actually doing better than other income brackets and things like that. But besides that, I believe taxing isn't the way to go, but if the federal government wants to say, corporations, you have to pay $15 an hour, but small businesses, to help support you can say it's $7.25, or you don't have to pay a minimum wage, and you can set it to how you think your profits are going to go, so you can be profitable and your employees can be profitable. I think that would probably be the best alternative to everybody must pay their employees $15 an hour, surprise, or increasing it slowly every year. Not just. If you don't mind me,
sorry. If you don't mind me asking, okay. I'm wondering what your opinion is on this. So, wait, I just lost my train of thought. Oh my gosh, I was thinking about minimum wage, but yeah, I just lost my train of thought.
That's okay. So maybe if I walk back, I might be able to jog it.
Oh no, it was completely off the cuff. Oh jeez.
It's all right. So it is currently reaching the end of our time limit. I believe, Lindsay, you have somewhere to be pretty soon, right?
Yeah.
So I think we had a pretty reasonable discussion. I think we both agreed to disagree on certain things, and we both found common ground.
Mm-hmm.
I believe this might be a pretty short episode just because of how much time we had to record today. But I think it was pretty good. I want to thank everybody for watching. I want to thank Lindsay for agreeing to come on and be a constant host with us. It gives us a little bit more disagreements, a little more of a discussion, rather than me and Jacob just kind of saying yes to each other.
Should I say what I like am like politically? By the way,
Sure, you can if you want to tell everyone what your views are.
Yeah, just so everybody knows, I'm a centrist, but I do typically lean Democrat. I also lean a little bit. I'm not a communist, but there's something. I'm not a communist, but there's some things from communism that I, so I'm like in that area.
And that's perfectly fine. We're the whole point of Divided We Fall, the podcast here, is to send a message of unity. We need to come together. We can't be at each other's throats. We need to understand that even though America, we might have different views for where we want to take it, we still need to do it together, and we can't be doing infighting. And I think this is a great way to show that we have I'm more of a center-right libertarian. Lindsay's more of a center-left pseudo-communist Democrat.
Yeah.
And Jacob is just all over the map, wherever he pleases, where the wind takes him.
Sure.
But yes, to wrap it up, I want to say thank you to everybody again. Huge thanks to Lindsay for coming on and going to be a constant on the show, give us a little more diversity. And I hope this meets you all well. Thank you, and goodbye.